History has a strange habit of making difficult decisions look obvious. Looking back, it seems inevitable that artificial intelligence would reshape industries, rewrite software, and become one of the most valuable technologies on Earth. But history has another habit. It quietly erases the years when nobody believed. Long before AI dominated headlines, before governments announced billion-dollar initiatives, before companies rushed to add AI to every product they sold, a different story was unfolding. Inside offices and engineering labs, one company kept investing in a future it couldn't prove. Quarter after quarter, year after year, the technology was expensive, the market was uncertain, and the payoff, if it ever came, was impossible to predict. Most businesses are rewarded for solving today's problems. This company kept preparing for tomorrow's. To many people, that looked like unnecessary risk. To others, it looked like stubborn optimism. What almost nobody realized was that every year spent building without immediate validation was quietly increasing the distance between this company and everyone trying to catch it. When the world finally demanded the technology, the race was already over. Not because one company moved faster, because it had started running decades earlier. This isn't the story of artificial intelligence. It's the story of something much harder. The courage to keep building before the future agrees with you. There is a pattern that appears again and again in business history. People celebrate vision, but they rarely celebrate the years before vision becomes profitable. Those years are uncomfortable. Investors ask difficult questions. Competitors dismiss expensive experiments. Even talented employees wonder whether the company is chasing the wrong future. The pressure isn't simply financial. It's psychological. Every quarter without obvious results becomes another argument for choosing the safer path. Most companies eventually do, not because they're poorly managed, because certainty is comforting. Markets reward visible progress. Customers pay for today's products. Boards measure today's performance. Building for a future that hasn't arrived can feel like explaining tomorrow to people who are paid to evaluate yesterday. That is the environment where truly consequential decisions are made. Not in moments of confidence, but in long seasons of uncertainty. Long before artificial intelligence transformed global business, NVIDIA had already built a reputation as a leader in graphics processing. Its graphics processing units, better known as GPUs, powered increasingly sophisticated video games, professional visualization, and high-performance computing tasks that demanded parallel processing rather than traditional sequential computation. That business was real. It generated customers. It generated revenue. It generated credibility. For many companies, that would have been enough. Protect the successful product. Improve it incrementally. Avoid unnecessary risk. Instead, NVIDIA kept asking a different question. What else could this technology become? At first, there wasn't a clear commercial answer. Researchers saw possibilities. Engineers imagined broader applications. But imagination doesn't appear on quarterly earnings reports. The obvious choice would have been to focus entirely on graphics. After all, the gaming market was growing. The business worked. Why complicate success? Because inside NVIDIA, leadership wasn't thinking about the next product cycle. They were thinking about the next era of computing. That distinction would become one of the most important strategic advantages in modern business. Not because they knew exactly what the future would look like. No one did. But because they believed computing itself was changing. If that belief proved correct, graphics processors might one day become something much larger than graphics processors. At the time, it sounded ambitious, perhaps even optimistic. Years later, it would look like foresight. But foresight is often just persistence viewed from the future. And the most difficult part of persistence is continuing before anyone can prove you're right. That challenge was about to produce one of the defining decisions in NVIDIA's history. One that wouldn't fully reveal its value for many years. Success has a hidden danger. It convinces companies that the future will look enough like the present to justify doing more of the same. History suggests otherwise. Entire industries have disappeared because yesterday's winning formula became tomorrow's blind spot. NVIDIA's leadership understood something uncomfortable. A successful graphics company could remain a graphics company forever, or it could become something much bigger. The problem was that no one could guarantee the second path even existed. During the early 2000s, GPUs were already proving their value in gaming and visual computing. Their ability to perform many calculations simultaneously made them exceptionally powerful for graphics. But inside research laboratories and universities, a different possibility was beginning to emerge. Scientists discovered that the same parallel processing strengths that rendered realistic images could also accelerate complex scientific calculations. The chip designed to draw pixels might also help solve problems far beyond graphics. It was an intriguing idea. But an intriguing idea is not the same as a business strategy. For NVIDIA, the obvious move would have been to refine what already worked. Release better graphics cards. Win more gamers. Protect market share. That path carried far less risk. Instead, the company made a decision that would demand years of patience. In 2006, NVIDIA introduced CUDA, the Compute Unified Device Architecture. To many people outside engineering, it sounded like another technical announcement. It wasn't. CUDA fundamentally changed what developers could ask a GPU to do. Instead of treating the GPU as a specialized graphics component, programmers could now use it as a general-purpose parallel computing platform for a growing range of demanding workloads. That shift mattered because technology doesn't become transformative simply because it's powerful. It becomes transformative when other people can build on it. CUDA wasn't just software. It was an invitation. Researchers, scientists, universities, startups, developers. NVIDIA wasn't merely selling chips anymore. It was creating an ecosystem. And ecosystems have a remarkable quality. They become more valuable as more people invest their time learning them. Yet this decision came with an uncomfortable trade-off. Building a developer platform required significant investment. The return was uncertain. Many of the applications that would eventually benefit from CUDA hadn't matured yet. There was no guarantee enough developers would adopt it. No assurance that businesses outside graphics would embrace GPU computing. No certainty that the investment would ever justify its cost. From the outside, patience looked expensive. Inside NVIDIA, patience looked necessary. This wasn't a bet on one product. It was a bet on a new way of thinking about computing. That distinction would become the company's greatest competitive advantage. Because while competitors focused on selling faster hardware, NVIDIA was quietly making its hardware indispensable. Years later, when artificial intelligence researchers searched for computing platforms capable of handling increasingly complex neural networks, they didn't begin with a blank page. They found a mature ecosystem, familiar tools, years of documentation, and a growing community already solving difficult computational problems. None of that happened overnight. It had been built one decision at a time, long before the world was paying attention. And that's what makes this story remarkable. The greatest investment NVIDIA made wasn't measured only in silicon. It was measured in time. Time spent building. Time spent teaching. Time spent waiting. The market had not yet arrived. But the foundation already had. The question now was whether the world would ever grow large enough to need what NVIDIA had quietly spent years creating. One of the greatest misconceptions in business is that success arrives the moment the world notices you. In reality, recognition often arrives long after the work has already been done. By the early 2010s, artificial intelligence researchers faced a growing problem. Their ideas were improving faster than their computers. Training deep neural networks required enormous numbers of mathematical calculations, repeated millions, sometimes billions of times. Traditional processors could do the work, but they weren't designed to perform vast numbers of similar calculations simultaneously. That was exactly where GPUs excelled. Then came a breakthrough that quietly changed the direction of modern computing. In 2012, a deep learning system known as AlexNet dramatically outperformed its competitors in the ImageNet computer vision competition. One reason for that leap was its use of NVIDIA GPUs to accelerate training. For researchers, this wasn't merely a winning project. It was evidence. Evidence that graphics processors could become one of the most important tools in artificial intelligence. The headlines remained relatively quiet. Most people had never heard of ImageNet. Few outside the research community understood what had happened. But inside laboratories, universities, and technology companies, something significant had shifted. Questions that once sounded theoretical became practical. What else could GPUs accelerate? How much larger could AI models become? What would happen if computing power stopped being the biggest limitation? These weren't answers. They were invitations. And NVIDIA was already prepared to respond. Not because it had predicted every breakthrough, but because it had spent years building the tools researchers were now eager to use. That preparation created momentum. As more developers adopted CUDA, the software ecosystem became stronger. As the ecosystem improved, more organizations chose NVIDIA hardware. Each new user strengthened the platform for the next. It was no longer just a hardware company selling faster chips. It had become the foundation upon which thousands of engineers, researchers, and innovators were building their own work. This is one of the quiet truths behind enduring business success. Products can be copied. Prices can be matched. Even technology eventually becomes outdated. But an ecosystem built over years is much harder to replace. Because switching isn't simply about buying different hardware. It's about abandoning familiar tools, established workflows, accumulated expertise, and communities that have grown together over time. That kind of advantage cannot be manufactured overnight. It has to compound, year after year, decision after decision, long before the market fully appreciates its value. Then, almost suddenly, the world changed. Cloud computing expanded. Machine learning matured. Businesses began discovering practical uses for artificial intelligence beyond research laboratories. Demand accelerated. Not gradually, rapidly. By the early 2020s, generative AI and large language models transformed public awareness almost overnight. Companies raced to build new AI products. Governments announced ambitious initiatives. Technology leaders redirected billions of dollars toward accelerated computing infrastructure. To many observers, it looked as though NVIDIA had appeared at exactly the right moment. But that's the illusion history often creates. The opportunity looked sudden. The preparation was anything but. Behind every data center filled with NVIDIA hardware were decades of engineering decisions, software investments, developer relationships, and strategic patience that most people never saw. When the market finally arrived, NVIDIA wasn't scrambling to invent the future. It was ready to deliver it. And that raises an even more interesting question. If years of preparation became NVIDIA's greatest strength, why didn't more companies make the same choice? That answer has less to do with technology and far more to do with human nature. By the time the world finally recognized NVIDIA's position in artificial intelligence, the company looked almost unstoppable. Its chips powered cutting-edge research. Its software platform had become deeply embedded in scientific computing and AI development. Its influence stretched from universities to startups, from cloud providers to some of the world's largest technology companies. Looking back, the outcome seems almost inevitable. But history has a way of compressing decades into a single headline. It remembers the breakthrough, forgets the waiting. The truth is, NVIDIA's greatest challenge was never building faster processors. It was resisting one of the strongest forces in business: the temptation to stop investing in what doesn't yet appear to matter. That temptation destroys more companies than competition ever does. When quarterly results become the only measure of success, every long-term investment begins to look like an unnecessary expense. Research budgets shrink. Bold ideas are postponed. Projects without immediate returns are quietly abandoned. On paper, those decisions appear responsible. In time, they often become expensive, because the future rarely announces itself before it arrives. It appears quietly, almost unnoticed, and by the time everyone agrees it's important, the opportunity to build a lasting advantage has usually passed. NVIDIA understood something that many organizations struggle to accept. You cannot wait for certainty and still expect to lead. By the time certainty exists, someone else has already done the difficult work. Leadership is not the ability to predict the future with perfect accuracy. It is the willingness to prepare for several possible futures while the outcome remains uncertain. That distinction changes everything. Consider what CUDA represented. It wasn't merely software. It was years of patient investment in developers who might never become customers. It was documentation written for problems that hadn't yet become mainstream. It was engineering effort dedicated to possibilities that many executives would have considered too distant to justify. Those decisions required discipline because they produced something investors rarely see on a balance sheet. Capability. Capability is invisible until the moment the market suddenly needs it. Then everyone assumes it appeared overnight. But capability doesn't emerge overnight. It compounds. Just like trust. Just like reputation. Just like expertise. The same principle appears far beyond technology. A surgeon develops steady hands long before a critical operation. An athlete trains for years before standing on a championship podium. A filmmaker spends countless unseen hours refining a craft before directing an award-winning story. Preparation almost always happens in private. Recognition almost always happens in public. Business is no different. When generative AI captured the world's attention, NVIDIA wasn't beginning its journey. It was revealing the results of one. The headlines celebrated soaring valuations and unprecedented demand. But those headlines were describing the harvest. The planting had happened years earlier. That may be the most overlooked lesson in modern business. Success rarely surprises the people who spent years preparing for it. It only surprises those who noticed it late. And perhaps that's why so many companies struggle to repeat NVIDIA's path. Not because they lack talented people, not because they lack funding, but because they underestimate the emotional cost of waiting. Waiting while competitors appear to move faster. Waiting while critics question your priorities. Waiting while the market rewards someone else. Remaining committed through that uncertainty requires more than confidence. It requires conviction. And conviction is easiest to admire after it has already been rewarded. Much harder to practice before it is. That is the difference between reacting to the future and quietly helping create it. Imagine walking into a forest and seeing an enormous oak tree. Most people notice its height, its strength, its ability to withstand storms. Very few stop to think about the decades spent growing beneath the surface before it ever dominated the landscape. Great companies often grow the same way. By the time the world notices them, the invisible work has already been done. That is why NVIDIA's story matters. Not because it became one of the world's most valuable companies, but because its greatest competitive advantage was built long before most people realized there was a competition. The company did not wait for the future to become obvious. It invested while the future still looked uncertain. It developed tools before they became essential. It nurtured a community before it became indispensable. It accepted years of questions in exchange for the possibility of decades of relevance. That is not merely a technology strategy. It is a way of thinking. The temptation in business and in life is to chase whatever is already succeeding, to follow visible demand, to wait until the evidence feels overwhelming. There is safety in that approach, but there is rarely leadership. The companies that define an era are often the ones willing to prepare for it before the crowd arrives. Not because they possess perfect foresight, but because they understand that lasting advantages are rarely built under the pressure of urgency. They are built through consistent decisions made long before anyone is watching. That doesn't mean every long-term investment succeeds. Many don't. Preparation is never a guarantee of victory. But history suggests something equally important. When extraordinary opportunities appear, they almost always favor those who prepared before certainty existed. Perhaps that's the real lesson hidden inside NVIDIA's journey. Vision is not the ability to predict tomorrow with perfect accuracy. Vision is the discipline to keep building when tomorrow still feels invisible. Years from now, historians may describe the age of artificial intelligence through breakthrough products, record market values, or transformative technologies. Those stories will be important, but they will also be incomplete, because behind every visible breakthrough lies a quieter story. The years when progress looked ordinary, the meetings where difficult investments were approved, the engineers who kept refining ideas with no guarantee of recognition, the leaders who resisted the pressure to abandon the future in order to protect the present. Those are the moments that rarely make headlines. Yet they are often the moments that shape history. And maybe that's why the most valuable lesson in NVIDIA's rise has very little to do with chips, software, or artificial intelligence. It has everything to do with patience. The patience to keep improving when applause hasn't arrived. The patience to keep investing when results remain uncertain. The patience to believe that preparation has value, even before the market agrees. Because in the end, the future does not usually belong to the company that reacts first. It belongs to the company that prepared first. That is the decision that built an AI empire. And it is a principle that will outlast every technology we know today. Every empire has a turning point. Every turning point hides a principle. Find the principle, and you'll never look at business the same way again.